our Japanese American community and for the multicultural community that we serve today in Altadena. So I'm really, really honored and overjoyed to have with me our guests who are participating in the interview today. From the Center for Restorative Justice, we have Executive Director John Williams. Give you a warm welcome. Wendy is also our executive presbyter of our local region, and she has been dutifully and lovingly serving our region and helping this church for so many years, and she is on her way to retirement. So we're extra lucky to have her and celebrate her as she is getting ready for her retirement. There's actually a celebration next week for her. But we're so lucky to have you, Wendy and John. And if you want to give any other further introductions, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is truly an honor for me to be here today. I always a special treat when I'm invited into a different cultural context, into a different cultural body, and so I'm going to try to be the best guest that I can be, and hopefully this afternoon will be a really good time of just really a conversation between the three of us. I'll be kind of and just grateful to be here, and thank you for coming.
Hi everyone, is this on? How about this?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Hi. Whenever I'm in this room, I always think about, I may be the only person who knows this, because whenever I mention it, people go, what? And then they look up there. Because I grew up in this church, as you all know, and my parents spent so much time in meetings in this church that I would just like wander around every nook and cranny of the buildings. And if you ever go into behind the accordion doors, there's a stairway up, and that's a storage area. I would climb up there and like look at people from there. So suffice it to say, I knew this church fairly well, but I always say that people think about my family being with this church for a long time. I guess we have, but we are not the family of the family of families. And I always want to honor the people who actually did come together to found the church. And in fact, like one of the clans, the Uchida and Mitsumori clan, we're really hoping that they could be here too. But I just wanted to say I will share what I can, and just know how much this church and the experience of the people of this church shaped my faith and my ministry, and will always do that.
Great. Well, I want to start with just a few opening statements, and then I'll ask you all some questions. Also, on your seat you have a sheet of paper. It's really a reflection, a short reflection that I wrote for each of you to take home after this experience, and after you learn things. I'm sure it will prompt some questions for you, maybe to ask your relatives, or just kind of what's your role in the ongoing history of this church. Because every single day that passes by, it becomes a part of the history. So I am definitely a history buff, and I love learning about the history of our fair city of Altadena and Pasadena, our fair cities. And so some of the stuff that we do at the Center for Restorative Justice, or one of the things we do is we call it a race and place pilgrimage through the city of Pasadena and Altadena, and looking at the history of African Americans, Japanese Americans, all Asian Americans, indigenous folks, as well as Latino folks. And so I always get the opportunity to learn more. And when we go throughout the city, we always bring in storytellers. I do not know the history of everyone. I do not know everyone's history. So it's always a great opportunity for myself to learn more about others' histories, and Wendy and I were briefly talking before this, and the similarities and the differences in terms of our histories and what they overlap, because we all do take up space in this wonderful part of the world. So I just want to say it's an honor to a refuge and a strength for this community. Psalm 46 begins with God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in a time of trouble. That phrase for me, refuge and strength, feels both like a prayer and a testimony. It reminds me, and should remind all of us, that faith isn't found in the absence of hardship, but in the presence of God amid the storm. And for this congregation, as I was studying and prepping for today, I have learned that Japanese Americans across generations, that truth has been lived out in powerful and painful ways. Refuge found in the fellowship of the church when the world outside was filled with suspicion and exclusion. Refuge in the stories whispered across kitchen tables in the quiet dignity of rebuilding lives after incarceration, and strength in the courage to keep faith, to sing, to serve, to dream, even when the ground itself felt uncertain. This afternoon, as we listen to generations reflect on those that they remember, on those who rebuilt, and those who reimagined, we are reminded that refuge is not just the love that carries memory forward. And that's what we're going to be doing today, is carrying memory forward. So as we and in the quiet, enduring faith, it continues to say, God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. Our church must. As I was studying, in 1913, Pasadena was still full of orange groves, where, as I understand it, were young workers and students, and they were far from home, but they built community through faith. When you picture those early days of worship, dorm rooms, and English classes, what do you imagine it was like for them during that time?
Because again, because my family didn't come in until the church was pretty established. One thing I will say is, that we know this, that we're Japanese in Pasadena, then more from landscaping, forests, or raising food. So it very well be Felicity. We should ask her. Now we're known for baseball.
Yes. That's right. Yes.
But yeah. So I think one thing that's always so important, especially for folks who are coming from other countries, where English is not their first language, that just being separated from your family, especially being a young man, being separated from your family and not yet in a position to raise your own family, then you really need to have people who will let you know that you're okay. Because again, like you say, many of us have had that experience where the world has told us that we're okay. Yeah. And so how they adjust to this is a huge issue.
Before I ask you, Veronica, what were some of the, this is
first, when it was like a boarding house, when the very first young men who were being housed, and so that would be the primary thing.
Right. Yeah.
To find housing, to be a welcoming community. I actually think for several generations it was just enough to be a welcoming community.
Yeah.
And I give props to the other churches in Pasadena, because I think there were like 11 or 13 churches that contributed to the ministry. And so just having folks care and be concerned in terms of their needs is probably all that they could do.
Yeah. It's really powerful. Any thoughts from you, Veronica?
Yes, just for those who might not be totally familiar with the history of this church, we're officially founded in 1913. I believe it was a group of 23 young Japanese immigrant men, mostly in their 20s, including Mr. Uchida's father. Yeah, so a very young group of men, and there were a number of churches in Pasadena that considered it mission work to fellowship and share the Bible and the gospel with these young people. And when this group of Japanese men that had been, they'd been working with and developing relationships for some time, decided we do want to become Christians and we do want to worship in a place, in our own place of worship, they helped them establish a church. Of course, in 1913, it was a lot to be welcoming, but they did help them start a segregated church. And that is the history, that's the roots of where we came from at one time. But it was a number of churches, and also we actually have a list of individuals who specifically helped provide the financial support and the relational networking a chartered church with those original members.
Thank you. That's really good. And so you made reference to these two folks here. Can you introduce who they are, and so that everyone knows like who's here and what rich history is here?
Apparently, somebody doesn't want me to be eating in front of you.
You could. Sorry, I told them to make your food before we started.
Yeah,
those otas.
She said, because last year I didn't get one.
We want to make sure you do much.
Yeah,
This is what makes me community, right? Is to like have these traditions that you hold to. Okay, so now I feel like a sports star because my cousin's son, who's a sports photographer. Sorry, what did you ask? Oh, Bob and May Uchida.
Yay, Bob and May.
Yeah, as Veronica said, obviously she studied this much better than I have. But Bob's family is one of the founding families of this church and has been a strong leader, continues to be a strong leader, continues into however many generations. You're going to say? Yeah. Yeah, okay. I still feel so old that I feel like you're like farther down the line. But folks like Bob and Betty, folks who I grew up with, Betty Kiriana, folks who I grew up with, and now they're here and they're just like that pillar of strength that you talked about. And that allows me, now I'm going to get all emotional, but that allows me to go forward because I know that they went through so much and they still hold their head high and witness to God's goodness through their lives. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And if at any point during our conversation you would like to add in, you're more welcome to come and participate and give us words of wisdom or pieces of history. So thank you so much I've heard so much about both of you, and I've been looking forward to meeting you. As I said before you arrived, I'm kind of an armchair historian. So, and in particular, the history of this city, and so your names have come up numerous times in my learning, and so one of the things that we do at the center is we do an Asian American pilgrimage. And so we do a 7-day experience. We start in San Francisco, everybody meets there, we go to Angel Island, and then we trek down from there. And here, right here in this space, is the last session where we do the kintsugi exercise. And so as we trek down, we get to hear about different Asian ethnic groups, but in particular, every year we stop at Manzanar and have the opportunity to talk with Bill Watanabe, who I'm friends with, and he's been so gracious to be a part of that experience. And so for me, one of the questions that I have for you, and possibly you, is why, once your people were taken and incarcerated in the internment camps, the folks who did not have that non-Japanese American folks, what was the refuge? Were there people here in the city who helped to protect the property, who helped to ensure that once your internment was over, that there was a smooth transaction? What was that like? Yeah.
Okay. See, so here's because I mean, you know, I'm a kid, and my parents never actually sat me down and said, "Let me tell you exactly what happened." Right? So I get these like snippets of stories. My memory is that there were a few individuals. Unfortunately, I think the Japanese do not have a strong memory of churches or large groups of people coming forward in our defense. And in fact, one of the things that I think many of us try to say now to the Japanese Americans who are fairly established and comfortable is there were people who did not come forward for us, but we need to come forward for others, because there are people who you know are going through exactly or very similar to what we went through. I would say of the churches, I mean the Quakers were the ones who were the most supportive of us, the Quakers. And in fact, there was Herman Wilson a Quaker? Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tori. Yeah, so there were individuals who were very supportive, who would actually go and visit the camps. Most of our people went to Gila, Arizona, so they would go and they would visit the camps. And then there was another man named Carr, who was not a Quaker, but he was just a realtor who was open-minded, who helped us to be able to find homes when we came back and we were redlining. It was not, again, we were not welcome to open homes at the time. And so he kind of broke the color barrier that way and helped to do that. During the camps, there was, I think it was one white woman from the neighborhood who actually moved, I think she moved into the Cocoa Blue Manse. Is that right? Did she move into the manse on the campus of the church?
I don't get the name.
I don't know.
We don't know her name, but she moved into the manse and watched people's, she kind of
so
over the campus.
There was a woman who moved onto the campus of the church during the war because people had put their belongings in the basement, and but you know, we were blessed that it was just us, and so when we left, it was empty.
Right.
You know? And so to avoid vandalism and thievery, then she actually moved onto the campus of the church to protect it. I will also take this moment to you know, in later years, people kind of pick up new information or tell more stories. And one of the things, of course, that redlining is a funny thing, because in Pasadena, in some areas, it's you know, it overall was terrible, but it was also an opportunity for some interesting groups to come together. And so there are stories of, in fact, because the Blacks and the Japanese lived together in Pasadena, and there are stories of Black families taking care of the homes of Japanese families, like the Jack Robinson's family taking care of the Takayama's families.
Wow.
And so there was also, so it was really more about individuals coming forward.
I know that, I think there was a family, African-American family, the Harrisons, and one of the Harrisons was a real estate agent as much as possible, because there was redlining. And is everyone familiar with that concept of redlining? And so, just for those who don't, just very, very quickly, it was a federal policy that outlined different areas within many cities across the United States where non-white people were relegated to certain areas of a city or a town. And it was a color-coded map. It was green, blue, yellow, and red. And red meant that's where mostly Black and brown Asian folks were relegated to. And so I just want to make sure that as we're talking, that we're all on the same page of that. So if I'm, go ahead.
Well, so let me tell you, because I was, there's some great interactive maps, online maps of redlining. And so for this area, I mean, it's not just by coincidence that our community kind of snaked down Lincoln Avenue, and then it also kind of took a turn down to Orange Grove and ended up, and so many of us, like one of the floors of the Uchita's floors, was actually pretty far down because we don't think about it that much, but that red line thing followed down where now the 710 was supposed to be. Yes. And I don't think it's a coincidence again that the place where the freeway took over whole communities was in the redlining section, but it's a very thin strip that went pretty much down to where Huntington Hospital is. And so a lot of folks like my mom and Felicia Tomi and that they all lived down there because back then that's where it was Japanese. Just to give some
no, this is great. This is great. I mean, and these things kind of play with each other hand in hand. And as you said, as Japanese Americans were coming back from the internment, we had redlining, and so it's not as if Japanese Americans can move anywhere within Altadena, Pasadena are relegated to. And I love how you described it, this kind of snaked area. Usually, when I'm speaking, I actually have a 10-foot by 10-foot redlining map that I bring, and I'm kind of bummed that I didn't bring it today. I was late, I'm running late. And so that way, it gives this great idea of being able to look at it. And one thing I'll say before I ask the next question is if you go down the street by Good Neighbor Bar, and you see that map of where the fires hit and impacted, you can see all the little flames and where it hit most, where it hit hardest, it was coming down this neck. And there are reasons in terms of there are less trees, more wires, and so we had a natural disaster, and it was horrible, but it was exacerbated because of policies in the past. And so, so we definitely have that. So we have you coming back or going, and then there are families, as you're saying, who were gracious and generous enough, and who acted, who kind of God's hands and heart to be a refuge on behalf of the community to hold and preserve your things. And so once, or as you return, can y'all talk a little bit about what it was like here at this church, and as well as the larger Japanese American community here in Pasadena, Altadena? Jump in first.
John, I wanted to add one anecdote that was something that came to mind as I was thinking about the camp experience. My husband and I had the opportunity to visit Hart Mountain, where there was in Roar, Arkansas. And I've met some families who were at Hart Mountain, but I didn't think I knew anyone. But I thought, well, it's great, we're in Wyoming, we should go check it out. And we went, and we saw, as we're looking on the signs, Toriumi, Reverend Toriumi, Wendy's uncle, and her Aunt Sophie, who I immediately recognized as key figures, former pastors here, and members of the community. And I was so surprised to learn that they had done ministry work within the camp in Hart Mountain. So it's kind of interesting to think about the way the tapestry is woven when the community, diaspora were spread out, that again, this thread of faith connected people all the way up Hart Mountain that we can trace back to Altadena today. So yeah, someone of a younger generation, I thought that was really just kind of amazing to see people I knew on the wall of the memorial in Hart Mountain, Wyoming.
That's really good. Yeah.
Cousin was born, Karen was born.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, but you were asking then about kind of settling back into
Right, yeah, and settle back in, yeah.
Yes.
As old as I am, I was not born then. Actually, and stories I heard from a pastor when I was serving in Hawaii, because he was a very progressive and very activist pastor and a United Church of Christ, well, back then it was Congregational. And you know that even though a lot of the different churches helped our ministry, when it came to chartering as a congregation, it was a union church of Presbyterians and Congregationalists who are now the United Church of Christ. Anyway, so Reverend Tamura mentioned how when he was a young man, he was sent to, or called to come to Pasadena, and he was going to, and his job was to help resettle the Japanese as they came back from the camps. And the powers that be, I guess in the congregational system at the time, thought that the best way to do that was to have them join the white churches. That could always for a reaction. I was like, what? and he said, well, so I came over and I was told that was what the strategy was going to be, that was the way to overcome racism, was to have the Japanese join the white churches. And I was like, what? and Richard said, yeah, I was here for about a week before I realized that was like a really stupid idea. Because, and it's funny that you mentioned this as a segregated church. We would also consider it to be the community center. Yes. And the one place where we are not going to be faced with the people who either sent us there, looked like they sent us there, or did not stand up for us when we were sent there. And so I think it was critical that there be a community again that was. I would say this. I study a lot about immigration patterns. The ways that the different generations become more connected with the United States. And I think we Japanese, we were delayed by a generation, and I think it's because of the camps. Because for an additional generation, we were treated so much like foreigners that we stayed cautious of what would happen if we were told to join the church of people who don't know anything about us. For reasons, we were able to restart the church. And actually, the next strategy was for it to be a temporary housing for some of the families as they came back in. So again, housing, we talk about how housing is such a hard thing now. Apparently it's been a hard thing for a long time. And so there was a time when the Kensington, where the old church was, the Kensington church campus was used as a boarding house for people. And if nothing else, it was just a place where people could find each other. Like I said, most went to Gila, but some were sent to other camps, so it was a place to.
No, that's great. So Wendy and I were talking before we started the discussion, and giving a lot of thought to this whole year, kind of coming into the year, kind of understanding a change within the administration, and just thinking through Dr. King's concept of the love community. And for me, I've been thinking about how do we kind of make that more tangible, like visibly tangible. And I've been thinking of this whole concept of mutual aid societies and how they were very, very popular in the late 1800s in this country, and in the early 1900s. And you're really explaining another mutual aid society where you provide housing, food, education, opportunities, and how we need those today. And a little bit later, I'm going to ask some questions about today and how Japanese Americans are viewing what's going on with immigration, with ICE and all that's happening there. But in terms of that time period, you really got into it a little bit about the kind of care that was being provided. Were there other or additional forms of care once folks returned back from the camps? You talked about it within your community, and I love that. And a lot of times we get freaked out when we talk about segregated communities, and we shouldn't be segregated. But a lot of times that segregation is for safety. And that's kind of what you're alluding to and getting at. Were there folks outside of the Japanese community who are offering or contributing to that safety, that feeling of safety? And if not, this is history. We just got to wrestle with it.
Again, I wish that we could hear from folks who were there. One thing that I just have to say from the ways that my parents would talk and the pictures of their school pictures, is it really, Altadena has been interesting and in that case integrated community for a long time. And so I do believe that they were able to come back in and reconnect with not just with the Japanese, but with the larger community. I will never forget it. And it was probably in the 1980s or 1990s. My parents come back and my dad's like, "Oh my gosh, could you believe that we saw them?" And what had happened was they were having lunch at some restaurant in Pasadena, and they saw this Latino guy, a Mexican guy who they knew in junior high school, who they hadn't seen for decades, and yet they recognized each other and reconnected. And so there's that ability that from school to have these long-time relationships. So much of, I do a lot of anti-racism work, but so many of the things that I know and I remember were things that my mother said. One time where, do you remember the actor James Garner?
Yes.
Okay, so he got in some kind of car thing, auto thing. And so the police got involved, and it was with, he got into some altercation with a young black man. And so it was on the news, and of course it's the news, and he's a famous actor, and so they tended to be fairly sympathetic towards him. And he was saying, "Oh yeah, this young guy came up and he hit me in the car, had some accident, he was really belligerent, et cetera, et cetera." And my mother's watching this. And she's like, "He didn't. No, he didn't." I go, "What?" She's like, "No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Because he's a Valentine." Valentine for sure.
Yeah, I know exactly.
They may not make the connection. She goes, "No, because he's a Valentine, and I know that family, and he would not have done that." And and again, it's like for this Japanese woman to be able to stand up for this young black man, because of the family connections that they have. That's something that I think has made Pasadena a really special place. So I cannot tell you any official programs that were done.
Yeah.
I can tell you a few things that were not done, and I can tell you about, like I said, about the realtors who worked hard to convince the neighbors to allow Japanese families to buy property.
No, that's good. Yeah. Veronica, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I also don't know too much of the history, especially of other groups providing assistance, but something I always share that I think is really remarkable and stands as a testament to the strength of this community is the ways that we helped each other when we didn't receive some of the outside help. For instance, starting a credit union believe, right? So that is it.
Yeah, when did Soko start? Does anybody know? Dorothy, do you know?
I'm sorry, what was it?
Soko, Savings and Loan?
I know that the Japanese, because they were
Yeah.
not allowed to participate in the banking or the financial systems, had to create their own,
Yeah.
which probably was very successful.
So it was, and so I don't know if you young people know this because I think I may have been the last member. They closed it down after a while. But it was actually a savings and loan that was run in and for the members of this church. And because we couldn't get mortgages, we couldn't get loans. And my father, who was one of the directors, was always proud to say we had zero, what do you call it, defaults.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, can you imagine? Being a member of this family, this church, and a member of Silver Savings and Loan, and defaulting, that was going to happen. So,
No, that's great. Where was it located? Was it here in Pasadena?
no, it was
Oh, it's coming out of the church?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Yes, there would be no default.
yeah, and so in fact, and so this is the other thing I want to say is that for me, the big thing for us is to, again, how do we learn from our own history and be able to connect? And I still say out of that segregation, that safety, that strength
Yep.
is what allows us then to reach out and to connect with others. And so in fact, one of the things that has come up in some of I spend a lot of time with interfaith and ecumenical faith networks trying to figure out how to help rebuild Altadena.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I said was, okay, this might be kind of wild, guys, but my church started SNL for folks who couldn't get it. So maybe could we do that
Yes.
for folks in the African American community or in anybody who doesn't have access to big funds.
Right.
And they all kind of looked at me like, what? And then they came back and said, oh no, it's just that they're not savings and loans, now they're credit unions. And so that actually, but it's that kind of experience of in our own history to be able to say, is there something that we could be doing differently in other communities?
No, that's really powerful. We have a little bit more, we have about 10 minutes, so make sure there's time for questions from the audience. Are there any questions that you have for our panelists, for these fine folks over here, or even for me? But it's really, I want to shine a light on these two wonderful folks. Any questions?
I see a wonderful guest with a question there.
Yes.
Wonderful guest being asked. My name is Mikey. I work for the Refuge.
Lucky Koros at the Refuge.
And I grew up in Altadena. And I just wanted to share, when you brought up the savings and loan, I have a personal history with that. I think it was sort of on the downswing. We had just moved to Pasadena, New York Drive, Pasadena, Altadena. And my mother was working as a docent at the Gamble House. And she really wanted to buy a green house. And at the time, my parents were of the means to do that. And my father was a fiery, red-headed white guy from Scotland. And he found a great house I think it was on Hollister Hill. And they did all the paperwork and everything was approved. They went to a regular bank and they said, oh great, you're in. Come around the office and we'll sign all the documents. And they showed up at the bank. I won't mention the name of Security Pacific Bank. And they went to the bank, my mother and father, and my mother is African American from the south side of Chicago, and not even the good part. Is there a good part of the south side? No, there isn't. And they walked in, and the loan officer looked at them, and my father said, hi, I'm Michael Koros, this is my wife Betty. And the man looked at my wife, and he said, oh, the house isn't for sale anymore. It just went off the market. And my dad looked at his watch and he said, what year is this? And they didn't get it. And then my father made some descriptions about the man's lineage that I won't repeat here, and they did not get the house. So what they ended up doing, I believe, and I'm not certain, but I believe it might have been the savings and loan you spoke of. When did that one go defunct? Do you know?
I think in the 70s.
That would work on the timeline. About 1976 is when all this went down. But we ended up with a great house. So, you know where St. Elizabeth's Church is? When you go down Woodbury and it dead ends in Mar Vista, and there's that enormous house. That was our house. So, and then they sold it. My mother decided it was too big. So when you bring up the savings and loan, I think that's exactly where it ended up. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's wonderful, and I really appreciate that.
And whatever that lady says about me, it's probably true.
Like, he's a great friend, musician, what's the voice actor, very talented person, and a friend of Refuge, who we're so grateful to continue our relationship with.
You know, I love that. And again, that's the thing that I really love is that there's some old pictures that we have of Chester Hairston. And, you know, Chester Hairston is a great black composer and musical director, and he was rehearsing with our church choir. So there's pictures of him, conducting our church choir. And so there's this back and forth. And then there have been other times when we've been able to, like more recently, where this was the church that there was a young man who was killed in a drive-by shooting at New York High School. And they wanted to have the private service at a church, and then there would be this humongous service at New York. And for whatever reasons, none of the other churches would let them do it.
Wow.
And this church did. And so, so being able to again, out of our own sense of strength and community, we're able to support others. So
It's so powerful. Yes, sir.
My name is Marvin Inoue, and I volunteer at the Pasadena Police Town. But I know an individual there, we're called SOGS. SOGS stands for Sons of Gardeners. And this one gentleman there said that his father was a gardener, and he was working somewhere here. I don't know if it was in Pasadena, but he'd been working for this woman for a long time, and she says, so-and-so, the gardener, talking to his dad, he said, the house across the street's for sale. Why don't you buy it? And he says, no way, I can't buy it. He said, you can't buy it. You've been working for me for so many times, you have regular income. He says, I can't get it. He says, come with me. Along with Mikey saying, her husband happened to be vice president of security Pacific. Walks him in the office and walks past one guy's desk and says, give him a loan. And she goes on and talks to her husband, who's vice president. And that's how he was able to get the loan to buy this house. So on the opposite end, I mean, both sides of the story,
Right.
there are people that can pull strings for you.
Right.
And then I know that in the Japanese community, I don't know if there's one here that was here in Pasadena, but they had something called tamamoshi. And tamamoshi was basically the credit union for the Japanese community, so they could take money out of resources either to buy property or to help send their son or daughter to college. That went on. And I heard that happened in the African American community also. They had, because they didn't have regular places to go and get, loans from.
Yeah. And if they got the loan, sometimes it would be with usurious interest rates are really high interest rates, right? Really hard in a far more expensive loan than had a white person receive the loan. So thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate that. Any other thoughts or questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
Just wanted to, you mentioned earlier a pilgrimage that started up at Angel Island.
Yes.
And you mentioned 6 or 7. I'm
Yes.
just wondering, are the stops always the same or different, and what are they?
Oh, okay. So some of them are the same. So we fly up to, everybody meets up in the Bay Area, and we start with Angel Island. And then from Angel Island, we get a walking tour of Chinatown in San Francisco. And then there's a Japanese American pastor named Michael Yoshi, who we go to Japanese American Presbyterian Church. And
Is that in Japan?
so we went to Japan with this something different this year. We went to Japantown, former Japantown in Alameda,
Okay.
which was fantastic. And we had 2 sisters, and they were phenomenal storytellers.
Michael Richmond.
I'm sorry?
Michael Richmond. He would be the Methodist church.
Okay, okay. And so from there, we we do a walking tour through the city of Berkeley to learn about Southeast Asians, which is a fantastic, like 2-hour, very slow walking tour through Berkeley, and then we go to Yosemite just so that we can spend the night because you can't get to Manzanar in an easy way. And then the next day we go to spend the day at Manzanar. Bill Watanabe and me and Iwataki are kind of lead that for us. We spend 3/4 of a day there. And interestingly, because of the budget cuts, the museum in Manzanar isn't open as frequently, like all 5 days or 6 days out of the week. And so the day that we were there, the museum wasn't open. You can still walk the grounds. And so we did that. And then from there, we come to Los Angeles. We do a walking tour of Little Tokyo. We go to Chinatown. We go to the Chinatown Museum. We do kind of a lament. So there's certain things that we do in forms of remembrance, and so we do a lament around the memorial that's right in front of the Chinese American Museum, where the 19 Chinese Americans were lynched. 1872. Right, in 1872. So we have conversations about that. We go to Filipino town, and there's a beautiful mural that's painted there of Mr. Itlion, and talking about the strikes, the farmer strikes, and things like that. And then we do something incredibly fun. We do karaoke in Koreatown. And so, and then we end here. This year we ended here thanks in this room, thanks to Veronica, and we have a good friend of mine, Erin Takeuchi, and she leads us in an art exercise of kintsugi, and she does a teaching around brokenness, repair, and around the issue of justice. And so it's a 7-day experience. I invite all of you to come and participate in it. It is fantastic. We have storytellers all throughout that time. My role, I really see my role in that of just being able to curate the experience, integrating some of the most incredible ministers, historians, and just firsthand accounts of different pieces of times of violence, times of resistance within the Asian American community, and times of resilience. We talk about the history of immigration while we're there. We have Dr. Jane Hung, who's a professor at Oxy, and she talks a lot about immigration. And I really appreciate you asking the question, because one of the things that I noticed this year, we've done it 4 times. We started in 2019, the pandemic hit, and we've been doing it since 2022, 23, 24. And that is, this trip this year seems so much different. It seemed far more focused, and I really believe it's because of what's going on kind of in the larger issues of our country, nationally. And in particular, all of the Japanese American speakers made the connection between the internment camps and what's going on today. About that ecumenical kind of movement and folks coming together of saying, we're not going to allow this to happen again. And so I have personally witnessed just the strength of the Japanese American community and just saying, we're going to participate in this fight against what's happening in this country in connection with other immigrants. And it's been so encouraging for me to see that. It has inspired me. It's given me a lot of hope. And I want to say thank you personally to the strength and integrity of your community and what it means to me as an African American man and just as an American citizen. And so I went on far too long in explaining what we do, and I apologize, but I want to get some thoughts and some last comments.
I was just going to say you should go to Delano. I mean, the thing that is such an interesting thing is the Central Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And how there were Japanese there, there were Filipinos, that's where the birth of the labor movement came out of there. And then it's kind of gone through different groups, right? So it's Latinos and just how that carries forward the need for justice.
Yeah.
I want to say this, and actually when you mentioned Michael Yoshi, I smiled because for me personally, Veronica is like the hope for the future. But one of the things that I think people say about my family, like we're not a normal Japanese family, but there are that desire for justice is a witness of faith, and Michael Yoshi is a Methodist pastor who was retired, but he only came to faith because he was a Japanese American activist who was very active in the hearings for the redress for Japanese Americans, and he couldn't figure out why there was always this queue or this row of people who would just come and they wouldn't say anything, but they would just come and they came to every single hearing and kept wondering what was going on there. And he finally asked them, and they were all from the church. They were all Methodists, and that's what he felt like. Wow, if they could be that faithful and they could support this cause that I find to be so morally compelling. Maybe I should look into this. And that led to him eventually becoming a pastor.
I would tell him, he's never told me that part of the story, but I've had many occasions to talk with Michael, a dear friend, and who I aspire to be when I grow up. But I'd love to hear some thoughts from you.
Sure. Well, I'm very moved. Thank you, Wendy, for the kind words. I just feel so blessed to have grown up in this church community and to have been born into a fourth generation Japanese American Yonsei with mixed descent, that I grew up here knowing my third cousins, knowing my grandparents' business and who shopped at Ota's Market and who's here for Ota Burgers because they remember it from my grandparents. I think that's such a unique thing that I'm so grateful for. And so I am very motivated when I hear of the Japanese American community standing in solidarity with those who are living in fear for the way that they look, the language that they speak. It's just so crazy to me that in 2019, at our last official fall festival, we actually had a presentation that Wendy also participated on about the Japanese American history and what we were seeing in detention centers and why that was so upsetting to hear about people, innocent people being behind barbed wire fences again for reasons simply of where they came from. So I am grateful to you all for being here, for taking the time during Fall Festival when we all want to eat and hang out, but to pay honor to those who came before and look ahead to what next generations, for those who are members of this church and those who are not, those who are in this community, we're still here as a church, and how can we keep serving the community as we rebuild from the fires, as we step in and meet the needs of people who are dealing with food insecurity due to lack of benefits, and all the other myriad issues in our nation. But this little church can still do so much. I'm very grateful to be a part of. And again, say thank you to all and to our panelists today for joining us.
But you're a kiddo. You know, but the other thing that I think is important is ask for the stories to be told. Because we need to know these stories, and you know, especially our seniors. I guess I'm a senior now, so I guess it will change. But you know, but a lot of the seniors were always shy to talk. They're like, oh, we're not important, or you know, whatever. But that's how we learn, and that's how we become get the compassion to understand beyond just what we're facing. Whenever I get testy with the Japanese American community, it's like, you know, so we're comfortable, but that's not where the story should end. Right? I mean, we have in our memories, and we still have in our families, testaments to times when we were the ones who looked a certain way. And so we need to remember that first.
That's okay. As I said, you have the sheet of paper. I really encourage you to just reflect. Take some time this week or this weekend to reflect on these questions. And I just want to read the short prayer. It's at the end. May this church continue to be a refuge for the weary, a strength for the hopeful, a witness to the steadfast love of God from generation to generation. Amen. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Music?
Oh, yeah. As you exit, you don't need to hang around, but I had sang a song that I wrote in 2019 about my grandfather's experience of camp. And Wendy had me perform it. She said, you should sing that for the Fall Festival. And Mrs. Uchida said, how come you're not singing that song at our church? You're singing it at other churches. So I will sing your way out, but this is a song called Stand Up, and again, it's about my grandfather Frank Ota's experience in camp.
I think maybe John is on. Carol is a retirement, a Japanese retirement community. The folks who, it's a place for the rest of our seniors.
Okay, thank you.
They put my grandpa in a can, but it wasn't summer. They put a fence around his head. They feared my grandpa 'cause his skin was a shade of gold. His eyes looked like the guys they call enemies of war. I carry his story with me because he wanted me to know. Lest this happens someone again, I think we all should go. Stand up for the people who need it the most. Speak out for the people whose voices are turned low. Take a stand, hard man. It's far more precious than gold. Take a stand, come join the plan. God wanted us to know. Stand up. Thank you. And we're going to big thank you to our guest, Center for Restorative Justice, John. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Oh, yes. Let's grab that. Yes. Nick wanted to grab a group candle. Now champagne. I didn't know you're coming. Thanks for being here.